Hello, World History 1 students. This is Mr. Everton, and this is our third video in our Greece Part 2 unit. And today we're going to finish talking about the age of Pericles. Last time we talked about Greek philosophers, scientists, and mathematicians, and how they tried to use logic and reason to understand the world, to try to attain wisdom, to try to solve practical problems. Today we're going to talk about Greek literature. Specifically, we're going to talk about poetry and drama. And we're going to talk about how Greek literature reflects Greek values and Greek ideas about the world. So please make sure you turn to page 5.8 and take detailed notes. Greek literature began, and we talked about this before the break, but it bears repeating. Greek literature began with the figure of Homer. This is an illustration, a painting of a scene from one of Homer's two epic poems, the Iliad. The Iliad tells the story of the Trojan War, and here you can see the hero Achilles in a chariot dragging the dead body of his enemy Hector behind him in the dust. And this is an illustration of Homer's other great epic poem, the Odyssey, where you can see Odysseus is tied up to the mast of his ship, and some monsters called the Sirens are coming down to attack him and try to lure him and his crew to their death. So Homer may or may not have existed. The Greeks credit these poems to somebody who they'd called Homer, but we don't have a whole lot of evidence whether he existed or not. But they certainly give somebody named Homer credit for them. And they're epic poetry because they're written in verse. That makes them poetry. And they're epic, which they're really long. These are basically poems that are like the size of novels. And I already told you that they're called the Iliad and the Odyssey, and they're both, the Iliad and the Odyssey are very concerned with this idea of a cycle of violence. The idea that one violent act leads to revenge, and therefore a new violent act, which then leads to more revenge and more violence. And so one violent act leads to another until basically everybody's dead. And this had a lasting impact on both Greek culture and also European culture. So these epic poems were a unifying influence for the Greek city-states and helped them to have something in common, but they were also really important for later European culture. Many people believe that the most important texts in all of the foundational texts in all of Western civilization are the Bible and these two epic poems by Homer. So the other kind of literature I want to talk about today is Greek theater. And Greek theater in Athens during the age of Pericles was a major event. It was a major source of entertainment for the Athenians. And it was performed in amphitheaters, outdoor arenas like the ones you see here. And it was performed by men for men. Women were not allowed to go. Slaves were not allowed to go. This was entertainment for the male citizenry of Athens. And one type of play that was probably the most important was called tragedy. And in a Greek tragedy, you have a great person who is destroyed. This is somebody who's noble, who behaves nobly and tries to do the best they can. It's important that it be a good person, but through either a fault that they have or through circumstances beyond their control, they end up being brought low and usually dying, though maybe something else horrible happens to them. And this is supposed to inspire fear and pity. The Greeks knew that it's very easy when you look at someone else who's having a hard time to not empathize with them and not be able to relate to them. And so the idea of tragedy was that if you see somebody who's just a really great person, an example of somebody who we should follow, and that person can be destroyed and laid low by things that aren't really their fault, that would inspire us to be afraid that that could happen to us, and also inspire us to feel pity and empathy for other people when we see it happen to them. Recognize that things happen to people that aren't necessarily their fault. Greek theater was performed, as I said, only by men, and they would wear masks like the ones you see here in this illustration. And you need to know the names of two different Greek playwrights who wrote tragedies. Sophocles is the name of one, and he wrote probably his most famous play is called Oedipus the King, or Oedipus Rex, you'll sometimes hear it called. And Oedipus is a king of, I believe the city-state is Thebes, who is, unbeknownst to him, he gets into an argument on the highway with someone and kills him, and it turns out that it's his father, his long-lost father he never knew. And then he goes to Thebes and he ends up marrying this man's widow, who he didn't understand, didn't know was his mother. And so he does something that's, he had no knowledge of the crime that he was committing. But when he finds out that what he's done, he's so overcome with guilt and grief that he plucks both of his own eyes out and wanders the country blind as a beggar for the rest of his life. Another play in that same series of plays by Sophocles is Antigone. And Antigone tells the story of a young woman who wants to perform a funeral, bury the body of her dead brother, but her brother is a criminal in the eyes of the state, and they've forbidden that he be buried, and she chooses to bury him anyway, and so she's executed. So again, she wants to do something noble, she wants to take care of a beloved family member, but because there's a conflict with the government of her city-state, she ends up paying the ultimate price for that. This is a noble person who is destroyed by something that could happen to anyone. The other playwright you need to know is Aeschylus. And Aeschylus wrote a number of plays, but the one I'm going to talk about is called the Oresteia, which is actually a trilogy of 3 plays. And it tells the story of a family that is torn apart by, again, a cycle of violence, where the father sacrifices the daughter to the gods, and then out of anger, the mother kills the father, and then later the son takes revenge and kills the mother, and then the son is chased by these women who you see in this picture here, who are called Furies, who have snakes for hair, and they're chasing him until the goddess Athena intervenes and absolves him of his crime. So again, this is the hero of this play, Orestes. I mean, it's understandable that you would want to take revenge on your mother if she murdered your father, and yet he can be destroyed except if it weren't for the intervention of Athena, he would have been destroyed by something that is certainly very relatable for the Athenian audience. So Greek theater is really incredibly influential. In many ways, the Greeks invented theater. Their influence can certainly be felt in the work of William Shakespeare. Plays like Othello and Hamlet and Macbeth all tell stories of someone who has elements of greatness about them, someone who is capable of great things, certainly, and who is destroyed, usually by some fault that they have or through circumstances beyond their control. So that definitely is showing the influence of Greek theater. The influence of Greek theater can also be seen in popular culture. Like TV shows like Breaking Bad and Game of Thrones both involve characters at their center who have elements of goodness about them, who could be very noble or in some way flawed, but who are destroyed by actions that aren't completely within their control or by flaws that they have, character flaws that they have. And Darth Vader from Star Wars is another example of a character who starts off as a great person who is to be admired and emulated, but who is eventually destroyed. And so it's asking us to experience fear and pity, fear that something like that could happen to us, and pity for other people who we see in the world who are experiencing human failure and frailty, which is something that we're all capable of experiencing. So to summarize, Greek literature includes Homer, whose Iliad and Odyssey are epic poems that explore the nature of war and violence, and Greek tragedies written by Sophocles and Aeschylus were influential in their depiction of human failure. Thanks for watching. Next time, we will move ahead into discussion of the Peloponnesian War.